The bullet grazed Sarah Zimmerman's shoulder as she dove behind the water trough, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. And in that moment, she knew her past had finally caught up with her in the dusty streets of Monticello, Utah Territory, in the summer of 1878. Sarah pressed her hand against the bleeding wound, her teeth gritted against the pain. The shooter had disappeared into the maze of buildings that lined Main Street, leaving her alone and exposed. She forced herself to stand, her legs trembling beneath her worn calico dress. The fabric was already stained with dirt and sweat from her work at the laundry house, and now blood joined the collection of marks that told the story of her hard life. "Miss, you are hurt," came a voice from behind her, deep and concerned. Sarah spun around, nearly losing her balance, and found herself staring into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. They belonged to a tall man in his mid-20s, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly beneath his worn Stetson. He wore the practical clothes of a working cowboy, dusty from the trail, with a bandana tied loosely around his neck. "I am fine," Sarah said automatically, though the pain in her shoulder suggested otherwise. She tried to step away, but her vision swam and she stumbled. The cowboy caught her arm gently, steadying her with surprising tenderness. "You are bleeding. Let me help you to the doctor," he said, his voice carrying a slight accent she could not quite place. Not fully American, but something softer around the edges. "I cannot afford a doctor," Sarah admitted, hating the weakness in her voice. "And I cannot be seen with a stranger. People will talk." The cowboy's brow furrowed with concern. "People are already talking, miss. Someone just shot at you in broad daylight." "I think your reputation is less important than your life right now." Despite everything, Sarah almost laughed at that. If only this kind stranger knew just how little reputation she had left to protect. But she allowed him to guide her down the street, away from the gathering crowd of curious onlookers. She could feel their eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting already. Sarah Zimmerman, the ruined woman. Sarah Zimmerman, whose husband had left her after only 6 months of marriage when he discovered she could not give him children. Sarah Zimmerman, who now lived alone in a tiny room above the laundry house, scrubbing other people's clothes to survive. The cowboy led her not to the doctor's office but to a small boarding house at the edge of town. "My landlady, Mrs. Patterson, she knows healing," he explained. "She will not charge you money." Sarah wanted to protest, wanted to maintain what little dignity she had left, but the pain in her shoulder was growing worse, and she could feel blood soaking through her sleeve. She nodded mutely and let him help her up the steps. "Mrs. Patterson turned out to be a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and capable hands. She clucked her tongue when she saw Sarah's wound and immediately set about cleaning and bandaging it. The bullet had only grazed her, leaving a painful but not dangerous injury. "You were lucky, Mrs. Patterson said, tying off the bandage. "A few inches to the right and we would be having a very different conversation." "You know who shot at you?" the cowboy asked. He had been standing by the door, giving them privacy but clearly concerned. Now he stepped closer, his hat held respectfully in his hands. Sarah closed her eyes. She did know, or at least she had a strong suspicion. "My former husband has a brother," she said quietly. "He came to see me 2 weeks ago. He said I had brought shame to their family and that I should leave town. When I refused, he threatened me." "Why did you refuse?" the cowboy asked, not judgmentally but with genuine curiosity. "Because I have nowhere else to go," Sarah said simply, "and because I am tired of running. I have done nothing wrong. My husband left me because I could not bear children, but that is not a crime. It is not even a sin. It is just a cruel trick of fate." The cowboy was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah expected him to make his excuses and leave. Men did not want to be associated with a woman like her, a woman who could not fulfill what society deemed her most basic purpose. But instead, he pulled up a chair and sat down across from her. "My name is Franklin Grayson," he said. "I have been working on the Triple R Ranch about 10 miles north of here. I came into town today to pick up supplies." "Sarah Zimmerman," she replied, though she suspected he already knew her name. Everyone in Monticello knew who she was and knew her story. "Miss Zimmerman, I think you should report this shooting to the sheriff," Franklin said. "Your former brother-in-law cannot be allowed to threaten you." Sarah laughed bitterly. "The sheriff is friends with the Zimmerman family. He will not help me. He has already made it clear that he thinks I should leave town and stop causing trouble." "Then I will speak to him," Franklin said firmly. "This is wrong. You have every right to live here in peace." "Why do you care?" Sarah asked, searching his face. "You do not know me. You owe me nothing." Franklin met her gaze steadily. "Because it is the right thing to do, and because no one should have to live in fear." Over the next few days, Sarah discovered that Franklin Grayson was a man of his word. He went to the sheriff and insisted on filing a report about the shooting. When the sheriff tried to dismiss him, Franklin stood his ground, his quiet determination more effective than any amount of shouting. He also made inquiries around town and discovered that Sarah's former brother-in-law, a man named Robert Zimmerman, had been seen near the water trough just before the shooting. Sarah continued working at the laundry house, her shoulder healing slowly beneath Mrs. Patterson's careful bandages. Franklin stopped by each evening after his work at the ranch, ostensibly to check on her recovery, but staying to talk long after the medical inquiries were exhausted. He told her about his life, how he had come from Pennsylvania 5 years ago seeking adventure and opportunity in the West. His family had been farmers, respectable but poor, and Franklin had wanted to make his own way in the world. "You ever regret leaving?" Sarah asked him one evening as they sat on the boarding house porch, watching the sun set over the red rock formations that surrounded the town. Franklin considered the question carefully. "Sometimes I miss my family," he admitted, "my mother especially, but I do not regret the choice. Out here a man can be judged by what he does, not who his father was or how much land he inherited." "A man, perhaps," Sarah said quietly. "For a woman, it is different. We are judged by whether we can produce children, whether we can keep a husband, whether we can maintain propriety in every moment." Franklin turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. "That is not right." "No," Sarah agreed. "But it is how things are." "Then perhaps things need to change," Franklin said. Sarah felt something stir in her chest, something she had thought long dead. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of it, but she quickly pushed it down. Hope was dangerous. Hope led to disappointment. A week after the shooting, Sarah was walking home from the laundry house when she found Franklin waiting for her on the street corner. His face was troubled and she immediately felt a spike of worry. "What is wrong?" she asked. "I spoke to some men at the ranch today," Franklin said. "They told me that Robert Zimmerman has been spreading rumors around town. He is saying that you are a woman of loose morals, that you drove his brother away with your behavior." Sarah felt her face flush with humiliation and anger. "That is a lie. His brother left me because I could not give him children. I was nothing but dutiful and faithful during our marriage." "I know," Franklin said quickly. "I believe you. But Miss Zimmerman, Sarah, these rumors could make your life here impossible. People are already starting to talk." Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm evening air. "Then he is winning. He wants me to leave, and now he is making sure I have no choice." "There might be another option," Franklin said slowly, as if choosing his words carefully. This may be too forward and you are welcome to refuse, but I want you to know that you do have a choice." Sarah looked up at him, confused. "What do you mean?" Franklin took a deep breath. "If you were married, if you had a husband to protect you and defend your honor, Robert Zimmerman could not continue to harass you. The rumors would lose their power." For a moment, Sarah did not understand what he was suggesting. Then realization dawned, and she took a step back. "You cannot mean what I think you mean." "I am asking if you would consider marrying me," Franklin said, the words coming out in a rush now. "I know we have only known each other for a short time. I know this is not romantic or proper, but I respect you, Sarah. I admire your strength and your determination not to be driven from your home, and I think, given time, we could build a good life together." Sarah stared at him, her mind reeling. "You want to marry me, a woman who cannot have children, a woman whose reputation is in tatters." "I want to marry you because you are brave and honest and kind," Franklin said. "Because you deserve better than what life has given you so far. And because when I am with you, I feel like I have finally found something I did not even know I was looking for." Tears sprang to Sarah's eyes and she angrily wiped them away. "People will say you are a fool. They will say you could do better." "Then let them say it," Franklin replied. "I do not care what people think." "But do you care what I think?" Sarah challenged. "Do you care that I might say no? That I might refuse to be anyone's charity case?" Franklin's expression softened. "This is not charity, Sarah. This is me hoping that you might feel even a fraction of what I have come to feel for you. When I saw you that day, bleeding and afraid but still standing tall, still refusing to be broken, something changed in me. I know it is fast. I know it is not how these things usually happen. But out here in this hard land, maybe we do not have the luxury of waiting for perfect circumstances." Sarah's hands were shaking. She thought about all the reasons she should say no. They barely knew each other. He might come to resent her inability to bear children. The marriage might fail just as her first one had. But she also thought about the alternative. Leaving Monticello with nowhere to go and no money to her name. Living the rest of her life alone, always looking over her shoulder, always waiting for the next threat. And underneath all the practical considerations, there was something else. A warmth that spread through her chest whenever Franklin smiled at her, a sense of safety she felt in his presence, the way her heart lifted when she saw him walking down the street toward her. "I need time to think," she said finally. Franklin nodded. "Of course, take all the time you need. But Sarah, whatever you decide, I want you to know that I will still help you. Marriage or not, I will not let Robert Zimmerman hurt you again." That night, Sarah lay awake in her small room above the laundry house, listening to the sounds of the town settling into sleep. She thought about her first marriage, entered into with such hope and optimism when she was barely 19 years old. She had loved Thomas Zimmerman, or thought she had. But that love had been shallow, based on pretty words and promises that evaporated the moment she could not fulfill her wifely duty to produce an heir. Franklin's proposal was different. He knew the worst about her already. He knew she was barren, knew her reputation was damaged, knew she came with nothing but trouble. And still, he wanted to marry her. Still, he looked at her with those clear blue eyes and saw someone worth protecting, worth standing beside. But was that enough? Could respect and admiration grow into love? Or would she be trapping them both in a marriage of convenience that would slowly sour over time? The next morning, Sarah went about her work at the laundry house with mechanical efficiency, her mind elsewhere. Mrs. Chen, the elderly Chinese woman who owned the business, watched her with knowing eyes. "You are troubled," Mrs. Chen observed in her careful English. "Man troubles, yes." Sarah was startled. She had not realized her inner turmoil was so obvious. "How did you know?" Mrs. Chen smiled. Is always man troubles or money troubles. You have been working hard, so is not money, so must be man. The cowboy who comes to see you every day, yes. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. He has asked me to marry him. And you say no? Mrs. Chen asked, surprised. He is good man, I can see this. Kind eyes. I said I needed time to think, Sarah corrected. Mrs. Chen, you know my situation. You know I cannot have children. What man truly wants a wife who cannot give him a family? Mrs. Chen set down the shirt she was folding and fixed Sarah with a serious look. In my country I was married very young to man I did not choose. Good man, but I did not know him. We were married 30 years before he died. We had 6 children, but only 2 lived past childhood. Very hard life. Sarah waited, sensing there was more. One time I asked my husband, what if I had given you no children? Would you still love me? He think long time, then he say, children are blessing, but they are not love. Love is choosing to wake up next to same person every day. Love is working together when life is hard. Children come or not come, but love is choice. Your husband sounds like a wise man, Sarah said softly. Sometimes wise, sometimes fool, like all men, Mrs. Chen said with a slight smile. But he was right about this. You think about what you want, not what you think you should want. The cowboy, Franklin, he wants you. Question is, do you want him? Sarah carried those words with her throughout the day, turning them over in her mind. Do you want him? It seemed like such a simple question, but the answer was complicated by years of pain and disappointment. She had wanted Thomas Zimmerman once, and look where that had led, but Franklin was not Thomas. Thomas had been charming and smooth, full of grand promises and empty words. Franklin was quiet and steady, a man who showed his character through actions rather than speeches. He had stood up for her when no one else would. He had challenged the sheriff, had investigated the shooting, had offered her protection without asking for anything in return. And when she was honest with herself, truly honest, Sarah knew that, yes, she wanted him. She wanted his kindness and his strength. She wanted the way he made her feel safe and valued. She wanted to see his smile every day and hear his voice in the evening. She wanted the possibility of building something new, something that was not defined by her past failures. But wanting something and believing she deserved it were 2 different things. That evening, Franklin found her sitting on the steps of the laundry house, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. He sat down beside her, not too close, respecting her space. "Have you eaten?" he asked. "Not yet," Sarah admitted. Franklin pulled a wrapped bundle from his saddlebag. "Mrs. Patterson sent fried chicken and biscuits. She thought you might be hungry." They ate in companionable silence for a while, passing the food back and forth. The chicken was good, crispy and well seasoned, and Sarah realized she was actually quite hungry. When they had finished, Franklin carefully folded the cloth and set it aside. "I have been thinking about what I said yesterday," he began. "I do not want you to feel pressured. If you want to say no, I will understand. I will still be your friend, Sarah. I will still help you however I can." Sarah took a deep breath. It was time to be brave, braver than she had ever been before. "I need you to understand something first. The doctors told me that I will never be able to bear children. It is not that it is difficult or unlikely. It is impossible. If you marry me, you are giving up the possibility of having a family of your own." Franklin was quiet for a moment, and Sarah's heart sank. This was it. This was when he would realize what he was truly giving up and withdraw his offer. But then he spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "Sarah, I have been thinking about that, and I realized something. There are many children in this world who need homes. Orphans, children whose parents have died or abandoned them. If we wanted to be parents, we could still be parents. We could give a home to children who have none. It might not be the traditional path, but since when have either of us been traditional? Sarah felt tears streaming down her face before she even realized she was crying. You have thought about this, really thought about it. Of course I have, Franklin said. Sarah, I would not have asked you to marry me if I had not considered every aspect of it. I know what I am asking for. I know what I am offering, and I want you to know that if you say yes, I will spend the rest of my life trying to make you happy. Sarah reached out and took his hand, feeling the calluses from years of ranch work, the strength in his fingers. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I will marry you. Franklin's face broke into a wide smile, and Sarah thought she had never seen anything more beautiful. Truly, truly, Sarah confirmed, and then she was laughing and crying at the same time, and Franklin was pulling her into a careful embrace, mindful of her still healing shoulder. We will do this properly, Franklin said when they finally pulled apart. I will speak to the pastor tomorrow. We will have a small wedding if that is all right with you. Nothing fancy but respectable. That sounds perfect, Sarah agreed. But the next morning, when Franklin went to speak with the pastor at the Methodist church, he encountered an unexpected obstacle. The pastor, a thin man named Reverend Hollis, listened to Franklin's request with a pinched expression. I am afraid I cannot perform this marriage, Reverend Hollis said stiffly. Why not? Franklin asked, his voice carefully controlled. Mr. Grayson, I am sure you are unaware of Miss Zimmerman's situation, but I am afraid she is not a suitable wife for a respectable man such as yourself. There have been rumors about her character, and her first marriage ended in scandal. Franklin felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to remain calm. Reverend, the rumors about Miss Zimmerman are lies spread by people who wish her harm. Her first marriage ended because her husband abandoned her for reasons that were not her fault. She has done nothing wrong. Nevertheless, Reverend Holly said, I cannot in good conscience bless this union. I suggest you reconsider your choice of bride. Franklin stood, his jaw tight. Then I suggest you reconsider your calling as a man of God, sir. I thought the church was supposed to offer compassion and grace, not judgment and condemnation. Good day. He left the church feeling frustrated and angry. Sarah deserved better than this. They both did. But in a small town like Monticello, there were not many options. The Methodist Church was the only established congregation, and if Reverend Hollis would not marry them, who would? Franklin was walking down Main Street, lost in thought, when he noticed a small building he had never paid much attention to before. It was set back from the street, modest and well-kept, with a sign that read Catholic Mission. Franklin knew there were not many Catholics in Utah Territory, most of the settlers being either Mormon or Protestant, but he had heard that a priest traveled through occasionally to minister to the scattered faithful. On impulse, Franklin pushed open the door. Inside, he found a simple chapel with wooden pews and a plain altar. A man in his 50s, wearing the black suit and white collar of a priest, was polishing candlesticks at the front of the room. He looked up as Franklin entered. Good morning, the priest said, his accent marking him as Irish. I am Father Michael O'Reilly. Can I help you? Franklin explained his situation, including Reverend Hollis's refusal to perform the marriage. Father O'Reilly listened with a thoughtful expression, occasionally nodding. And you love this woman? Father O'Reilly asked when Franklin had finished. Franklin hesitated. He and Sarah had not spoken of love. Their arrangement was based on respect and mutual need, on the possibility of building something together. But as he thought about Sarah, about her courage and her pain, about the way his heart lifted when he saw her, he realized the answer was simpler than he had thought. Yes, Franklin said. I do love her. I know it has not been long, but yes, I love her. Father O'Reilly smiled. Then I will marry you. The church teaches that marriage is a sacrament, a holy bond between two people. If you love her and she loves you, if you are both entering this marriage freely and with open hearts, then I see no reason to refuse. Are either of you Catholic? No, Franklin admitted. I was raised Presbyterian, though I confess I have not been regular in my attendance. Sarah, I believe she was raised Methodist. That presents some complications from a church perspective, Father O'Reilly said. But I think, under the circumstances, I can perform a blessing ceremony that will be legally binding. It may not be a full Catholic marriage, but it will be valid in the eyes of the law and, I believe, in the eyes of God. Franklin felt relief wash over him. Thank you, Father. This means more than you know. Bring your bride to meet me, Father O'Reilly said. I would like to speak with both of you before the ceremony. Let us say tomorrow morning. Franklin agreed and practically ran back to the laundry house to tell Sarah the good news. She was scrubbing a particularly stubborn stain out of a tablecloth when he arrived, her sleeves rolled up and her hair escaping from its pins. Franklin thought she had never looked more beautiful. We have a priest who will marry us, he announced. Father O'Reilly at the Catholic Mission. He wants to meet with us tomorrow morning. Sarah set down her scrub brush, her eyes wide. The Catholic priest, but we are not Catholic. He does not mind, Franklin said. He says if we love each other, that is what matters. And do we, Sarah asked softly, love each other? Franklin took her wet, soapy hands in his. I love you, Sarah Zimmerman. I know I should have said it before, but I do. I love your strength and your kindness. I love the way you refuse to give up even when the world is against you. I love the way you see the good in people despite everything you have been through. I love you, and I want to spend the rest of my life showing you that you deserve to be loved. Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. I love you too, Franklin Grayson. I did not think I could love anyone again after Thomas, but you are different. You see me, really see me, not just what I can give you or what I represent. You make me want to believe in second chances. Franklin pulled her into his arms, not caring about the soap and water, not caring about the curious looks from Mrs. Chen in the corner. He kissed Sarah for the first time, a gentle kiss that tasted of salt tears and held the promise of better days ahead. The next morning, they met with Father O'Reilly as planned. The priest was kind and thorough, asking them about their intentions, their understanding of marriage, their willingness to support and cherish each other through whatever challenges lay ahead. He asked Sarah directly about her inability to have children and whether she had been honest with Franklin about it. I have been completely honest, Sarah assured him. Franklin knows everything about my past and my situation, and you are still willing to marry her. Father O'Reilly asked Franklin. I am not willing, Franklin said. I am eager. I am grateful that she said yes. Father O'Reilly nodded, satisfied. Then I will perform the ceremony this Saturday if that suits you. It will be simple, but it will be legal and binding. Do you have witnesses? Mrs. Patterson from the boarding house, Franklin said, and Mrs. Chen from the laundry house. They have both been kind to us. That will do perfectly, Father O'Reilly said. Now there is the matter of the marriage license. You will need to file that at the courthouse. I recommend you do it soon to avoid any complications. Franklin and Sarah went to the courthouse that afternoon, their hands clasped tightly together. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Albright, looked surprised when they presented their request. You are getting married? She asked, looking from Franklin to Sarah. Miss Zimmerman, are you certain? Quite certain, Sarah said, lifting her chin. Why do you ask? Mrs. Albright flushed. No reason, I just wanted to make sure. There has been talk in town, you understand. I understand that people enjoy gossip, Sarah said coolly. But that has no bearing on our legal right to marry. Mrs. Albright processed the paperwork with obvious reluctance, but she could find no legal grounds to refuse them. Franklin paid the fee, and they left with their marriage license safely in hand. Over the next few days, Sarah and Franklin made their simple preparations. Sarah had no family to invite and no desire to make a spectacle of herself, so they decided on a quiet ceremony with just their 2 witnesses. Mrs. Patterson helped Sarah make a new dress from cloth Franklin bought at the general store, a soft blue that brought out the color of her eyes. It was not a traditional white wedding gown, but Sarah did not mind. She had worn white for her first wedding, and look how that had turned out. Blue felt like a better beginning, like the wide sky over the desert promising endless possibilities. Franklin bought a new shirt and had his only suit cleaned and pressed. He also bought a simple gold band at the jeweler's shop, which he kept hidden in his pocket until the wedding day, wanting to surprise Sarah. On Saturday morning, Sarah woke early in her little room above the laundry house. It was the last time she would sleep here, the last time she would wake up alone. After today, she would be moving into Franklin's room at the boarding house until they could find a place of their own. He had suggested she wait and let him find a house first, but Sarah had refused. They were going to be husband and wife, and she wanted to start their life together immediately, even if it meant sharing a single room for a while. Mrs. Chen helped her dress, arranging her hair in a simple but elegant style and pinning a small cluster of wildflowers behind her ear. "You look beautiful," Mrs. Chen said, and there were tears in her eyes. "I am happy for you, Sarah. You deserve this happiness." "Thank you for everything," Sarah said, embracing the older woman. "You gave me work when no one else would. You treated me with kindness when the world showed me none." "You are good worker and good woman," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "Now go. Go marry your cowboy and be happy." At the Catholic mission, Franklin waited with Mrs. Patterson and Father O'Reilly. He had been nervous all morning, worried that something would go wrong, that Sarah would change her mind, that some new obstacle would arise to prevent their marriage. But when the door opened and Sarah entered, all his worries evaporated. She was radiant in her blue dress, her eyes shining with happiness and maybe a touch of nervousness that matched his own. The ceremony was simple, but meaningful. Father O'Reilly spoke about the nature of marriage as a partnership, a bond between equals who choose to walk through life together. He asked Franklin and Sarah to make their vows to each other, not the traditional formal vows but personal promises spoken from the heart. Franklin took Sarah's hands in his and looked into her eyes. "Sarah, I promise to stand by you through whatever comes. I promise to honor you and respect you, to listen to you and support you. I promise to be faithful and true, to work hard for our family, to make you laugh when I can and comfort you when you need it. I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life." Sarah's voice was thick with emotion when she spoke her own vows. "Franklin, I promise to be your partner and your friend. I promise to support your dreams and share your burdens. I promise to be honest with you always, to trust you with my fears and my hopes. I promise to build a life with you, whatever shape that life may take. I promise to love you with everything I have." Franklin slipped the gold ring onto Sarah's finger, and she stared at it in wonder, tears streaming down her face. He had not told her about the ring, and the surprise and joy on her face made every penny worth it. "By the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Father O'Reilly said, smiling. "Franklin, you may kiss your bride." Franklin cupped Sarah's face gently in his hands and kissed her, pouring all his love and hope and promise into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning, and Mrs. Patterson was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. They signed the marriage certificate with Mrs. Patterson and Mrs. Chen as witnesses, making it official in the eyes of the law. After the ceremony, Mrs. Patterson insisted they come back to the boarding house for a celebratory lunch. She had prepared a feast, far more elaborate than the simple fare she usually served, with roasted chicken, fresh vegetables, biscuits, and even a small cake for dessert. Other boarders joined them, raising glasses of cider and toast to the newlyweds. It was not a grand wedding breakfast, but it was warm and sincere, and Sarah found herself relaxing and enjoying the celebration. These people genuinely wished them well. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt like she belonged somewhere, like she was part of a community that valued her. But the happiness of the day was interrupted by a commotion outside. Through the window, Sarah could see a group of men on horseback approaching the boarding house. Her stomach dropped when she recognized Robert Zimmerman at the head of the group, his face twisted with anger. Franklin had seen them too. He stood, his body tense, and moved toward the door. "Stay here," he told Sarah quietly. "No," Sarah said, standing as well. "I will not hide anymore. Whatever he has to say, we face it together." Franklin looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. They went outside together, with Mrs. Patterson and several of the male boarders following protectively. Robert Zimmerman dismounted and strode toward them, his men spreading out behind him. "So it is true," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You actually went through with it. You married this ruined woman." "I married my wife," Franklin said calmly, though Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, "and I will thank you to speak respectfully of her." "Your wife," Robert spat. "Do you know what you have done? You have tied yourself to a woman who cannot give you children, a woman who shamed my family." "Your brother shamed himself when he abandoned his wife," Franklin said, his voice hard now. "And Sarah has done nothing wrong. She is my wife now, and if you continue to threaten her or spread lies about her, you will answer to me." Robert laughed harshly. "You, a drifter cowboy with nothing to his name, what are you going to do?" "Whatever I have to," Franklin said, "but I am hoping it will not come to that. Robert, this vendetta of yours serves no purpose. Thomas left Sarah. That marriage is over. She has moved on with her life, and I suggest you do the same." "My family will never accept this," Robert said. "The Zimmerman name means something in this territory. We have influence, we have connections. I can make your life very difficult, cowboy." Before Franklin could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "I think that is quite enough, Robert." Everyone turned to see Sheriff Dawson walking up the street, his deputy beside him. The sheriff was an older man, weathered and stern, and Sarah's heart sank when she saw him. He was friends with the Zimmerman family. She assumed he had come to side with Robert, but Sheriff Dawson surprised her. He walked past Franklin and Sarah and stood directly in front of Robert. "I have been hearing some concerning things, Robert. Things about threats and violence. Things about a shooting that nearly killed a woman." "You have no proof of that," Robert said, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. "Actually, I do," the sheriff said. "See, I did not pay much attention when Mr. Grayson here first reported the incident. I am ashamed to admit I let my friendship with your family cloud my judgment. But then I started hearing more stories. People who saw you near the water trough that day. The man at the gun shop who remembers selling you ammunition the morning of the shooting. And Mrs. Henderson, who says she saw you riding out of town in a hurry right after Sarah Zimmerman was shot." Robert's face had gone pale. "That is circumstantial. That proves nothing." "Maybe not in court," Sheriff Dawson agreed. "But it is enough for me to keep a very close eye on you. And if anything at all, happens to Mr. or Mrs. Grayson here, you will be the first person I come looking for. Do I make myself clear?" Robert glared at the sheriff but did not argue. After a tense moment, he mounted his horse. "This is not over," he said, looking at Sarah. Yes, it is, Franklin said firmly. It is over, Robert. Let it go. Robert and his men rode away, and Sarah felt like she could finally breathe again. She turned to Sheriff Dawson, still shocked by his intervention. "Thank you," she said softly. "I did not expect your help." Sheriff Dawson looked uncomfortable. "I owe you an apology, Mrs. Grayson. I let prejudice and old loyalties interfere with my duty. That was wrong. Mr. Grayson made me see that. He is a persistent man, your husband. Came to my office every day for a week, demanding I investigate the shooting properly." Sarah looked at Franklin, who shrugged modestly. "I told you I would not let him hurt you," he said simply. That evening, alone in Franklin's room at the boarding house, which was now their room, Sarah and Franklin finally had a moment of quiet. The excitement and stress of the day had left them both exhausted, but there was also a sense of peace, of having crossed a threshold into a new chapter of their lives. Sarah stood at the window, looking out at the darkening street, the gold ring on her finger catching the lamplight. Franklin came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am better than all right," Sarah said, leaning back against him. "I am married to a man who loves me. I am finally safe. I never thought I would feel this way again." "I will always keep you safe," Franklin promised. "Whatever comes, we will face it together." Sarah turned in his arms to face him. "I know I have said it already, but I love you, Franklin Grayson. I love you so much it scares me sometimes." Franklin smiled and kissed her forehead. "It scares me too, but it is a good kind of scared, the kind that means something real, something worth fighting for." They stood together in the lamplight, husband and wife, beginning the first night of their new life together. Over the next few months, Franklin and Sarah settled into married life with a comfortable ease that surprised them both. Franklin continued working at the Triple R Ranch, often leaving before dawn and returning as the sun set. The work was hard, long days of mending fences, herding cattle, and breaking horses, but he never complained. Sarah took on more responsibility at the laundry house, with Mrs. Chen teaching her the business aspects so she could one day perhaps run a laundry of her own. They saved every penny they could, living frugally and dreaming of the day they could afford a small house of their own. In the evenings, they would sit together in their room or on the boarding house porch, talking about their plans for the future. "I have been thinking about what you said," Sarah mentioned one evening, "about children who need homes." Franklin looked up from the saddle he was oiling. "What about it?" "There is an orphanage in Salt Lake City," Sarah said. "I saw an advertisement in the newspaper. They are looking for families willing to adopt orphans and give them homes. I wrote to them asking for information." Franklin set aside his work and took Sarah's hand. "Are you sure you are ready for that? We have only been married a few months." "I know," Sarah said. "And we do not have our own house yet, but I cannot stop thinking about it. There are children out there who need love and family, and we have that to give. Maybe not right away, but someday soon." Franklin pulled her into his lap, holding her close. "Someday soon," he agreed. "When we have a house with enough space, when we are a bit more settled financially." "But yes, Sarah. Yes, I want that too. I want to give a child or children the kind of home I had growing up, safe and full of love." A few weeks later, Franklin came home with news that changed everything. The owner of the Triple R Ranch was retiring and selling the property. He had offered Franklin and 3 other longtime ranch hands the opportunity to buy parcels of the land at a reduced price, essentially breaking up the large ranch into smaller, more manageable homesteads. "It is not a lot of land," Franklin explained excitedly. "Only about 40 acres, but it includes water rights to the creek and enough pasture for a small herd. We could run our own cattle, Sarah. We could build a house and have our own place." "Can we afford it?" Sarah asked, her heart racing with possibility. Franklin pulled out a small ledger where he had been tracking their savings. With what we have saved and a small loan from the bank, yes, it will be tight, but we can do it. We would have to build the house ourselves, starting small and adding on as we can afford it. But it would be ours, Sarah. Our own land, our own home. Sarah looked at the figures, at the dream laid out in Franklin's careful handwriting. "Let us do it," she said. "Let us build something together." The next 6 months were a whirlwind of activity. Franklin and Sarah purchased their 40 acres, a beautiful piece of land about 12 miles from Monticello, with a view of the red rock formations that gave Utah Territory its distinctive character. They started construction on a small house, just 3 rooms to begin with, but solidly built to withstand the harsh winters and hot summers. Franklin did most of the construction himself with help from some of the other ranch hands on their days off. Sarah contributed by cooking meals for the workers and helping with the simpler tasks. Slowly, their house took shape, rising from the dusty ground like a promise fulfilled. They also acquired livestock, starting with a dozen cattle and a small flock of chickens. Franklin built a barn and fences while Sarah planted a vegetable garden and established a small laundry business serving the scattered ranches in the area. It was hard work, harder than anything either of them had done before, but it was theirs. On a cool evening in September of 1879, more than a year after their wedding, Franklin and Sarah moved into their completed house. It was small but well built, with a main room that served as kitchen and living space, a bedroom, and a smaller room that they left empty for now but both knew would eventually be a child's room. Sarah stood in the middle of their new home, looking around at the simple furniture they had built or bought second-hand, at the curtains she had sewn herself, at the evidence of their hard work and dedication. Franklin came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist in a gesture that had become familiar and comforting. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it is perfect," Sarah said, and she meant it. This house might not be grand or fancy, but it was filled with love and hope. It was a home in the truest sense of the word. That night, lying in their own bed in their own house on their own land, Sarah broached the subject that had been on her mind for weeks. "I think we are ready now, to inquire about adoption, I mean." Franklin was quiet for a moment, his hand tracing gentle patterns on her arm. "Are you certain? It is a big step." "I am certain," Sarah said. "We have a home, we have a stable income, we have love to give. What are we waiting for?" "Nothing," Franklin said, and Sarah could hear the smile in his voice. "We are waiting for nothing. Write to the orphanage tomorrow." Sarah did write to the orphanage the next day, a carefully worded letter explaining their situation and their desire to provide a home for a child in need. She mentioned that they lived on a small ranch in Utah Territory, that they had a modest but comfortable home, and that they had a great deal of love to offer. She sealed the letter and sent it off with a prayer that it would be well received. The response came 3 weeks later. The director of the orphanage, a woman named Mrs. Harriet Foster, wrote that she was pleased to hear from them and that there were indeed several children in need of homes. She asked for references and additional information about their situation, which Franklin and Sarah promptly provided. Father O'Reilly, Mrs. Patterson, and even Sheriff Dawson wrote letters on their behalf, attesting to their good character and suitability as parents. In late November, Mrs. Foster wrote again with news. There were 3 children she thought might be a good match for Franklin and Sarah. The first was a boy of 7 named Daniel, whose parents had died of influenza the previous winter. The second was a girl of 5 named Emma, who had been abandoned at the orphanage as an infant. The third was a boy of 9 named Jacob, whose father had died in a mining accident and whose mother could not afford to care for him. "We cannot take all three," Franklin said when they read the letter together. "Not immediately, at least. We should start with one child and see how we manage." "Daniel," Sarah said immediately. "The 7-year-old who lost his parents. I cannot imagine what he must be going through. At least he is old enough to understand what is happening and young enough to adjust to a new family." Franklin agreed, and they wrote back to Mrs. Foster expressing their interest in Daniel. The process moved surprisingly quickly after that. Mrs. Foster arranged for Daniel to travel to Utah Territory with a group of other orphans being placed with families in the region. She would accompany the children herself and conduct home visits to ensure each child was going to a suitable family. On a cold day in January of 1880, Franklin and Sarah drove their wagon into Monticello to meet Daniel for the first time. Sarah's hands were shaking with nervousness. What if Daniel did not like them? What if they did not know how to be parents? What if they failed him the way the world had already failed him so many times? Franklin seemed to sense her anxiety. He reached over and squeezed her hand. "We will be fine," he said. "We will figure it out together, just like we have figured out everything else." The stagecoach arrived on time, and Mrs. Foster emerged with a group of children ranging in age from toddlers to young teenagers. Sarah scanned the group anxiously, trying to guess which one might be Daniel. Her eyes landed on a small boy standing slightly apart from the others, with dark hair and solemn eyes that looked far too old for his young face. He was thin, dressed in clothes that were clean but well worn, and he held a small bundle that Sarah guessed contained all his worldly possessions. Mrs. Foster noticed their attention and beckoned the boy over. "Daniel, these are Mr. and Mrs. Grayson. They would very much like to be your parents if you are willing." Daniel looked up at Franklin and Sarah with those serious eyes, evaluating them. Sarah's heart ached at the wariness she saw there, the defensive posture of a child who had learned not to expect much from life. Sarah knelt down to be at eye level with him. "Hello, Daniel. My name is Sarah, and this is my husband, Franklin. We have a small ranch about 12 miles from here. We have a house with a room that we hoped might be yours if you want it. We have chickens and cattle and a garden, and we have a lot of love that we would very much like to share with you." Daniel did not say anything for a long moment. Then, in a quiet voice, he asked, "Do I have to call you Ma and Pa?" Sarah was surprised by the question. "You can call us whatever makes you comfortable. If you want to call us Sarah and Franklin, that is fine. If someday you want to call us Ma and Pa, that would be wonderful. But there is no pressure, Daniel. We understand this is difficult." Daniel nodded slowly. "Can I see the house first?" "Of course," Franklin said. "We can take you there right now if you like. Mrs. Foster has already approved our home, but you should see it too. If you decide you do not want to stay with us, we will understand." This seemed to surprise Daniel, as if he had not expected to have any say in the matter. He looked at Mrs. Foster, who smiled encouragingly at him. "It is all right, Daniel. Go see the house. I will wait here in town tonight, and we will talk tomorrow about your decision." The drive to the ranch was quiet, with Daniel sitting between Franklin and Sarah on the wagon bench, his small bundle clutched in his lap. Sarah pointed out landmarks along the way, telling him about the neighbors and the landscape, trying to make conversation without overwhelming him. Daniel listened but said little. When they arrived at the house, Sarah showed Daniel around while Franklin tended to the horses. She showed him the main room with its fireplace and simple furniture, the kitchen area where she cooked, and finally the small bedroom that they hoped would be his. It contained a bed that Franklin had built, a small dresser, and a rag rug on the floor. Nothing fancy, but it was warm and clean and private. "This would be your room," Sarah explained. Your own space. You can decorate it however you like. We could make curtains together if you want, or you could draw pictures to hang on the walls. Whatever you like. Daniel set his bundle on the bed and looked around slowly. I have never had my own room before, he said quietly. At the orphanage, we slept in a big room with lots of beds. Would you prefer to share a room? Sarah asked, wanting him to feel comfortable. We could put another bed in here if you do not like being alone. No, Daniel said quickly. I like it. I just wanted you to know. It is nice. Franklin joined them, and they showed Daniel the rest of the property. He was particularly interested in the animals, approaching the chickens with cautious fascination. When Franklin offered to let him help feed the cattle, Daniel's serious face finally broke into a small smile. Over dinner that evening, Daniel slowly began to open up. He told them that his parents had been farmers in Iowa, that they had died when he was 6, and that he had been in the orphanage for just over a year. He had no other family, no siblings, no aunts or uncles who could take him in. I know how to work, Daniel said, as if this was an important selling point. I can feed animals and carry water and help with planting. I am small, but I am strong. Franklin and Sarah exchanged glances, their hearts breaking at this little boy's need to prove his worth. Daniel, Franklin said gently, we are not looking for a worker. We are looking for a son. Yes, everyone in a family helps with chores, and we would teach you about ranching and expect you to help as you grow older. But that is not why we want you here. We want you here because we have love to give and you need a family. That is all. Daniel stared at them, and Sarah saw tears forming in his eyes. No one will marry a woman like me, Sarah found herself saying, the old familiar words coming to her lips. That is what I told myself not so long ago. I thought I was ruined, that no one would want me. But then this man, she gestured to Franklin, he said he would be the first. He saw something in me worth loving when I could not see it myself. Daniel, we see something in you worth loving. You have been through terrible things, but that does not make you less valuable. It makes you strong and brave. We would be honored if you would be our son. The tears spilled over then, running down Daniel's cheeks. He did not make a sound, but his small body shook with silent sobs. Sarah opened her arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Daniel fell into them, clinging to her as if she was the only solid thing in a shifting world. Franklin wrapped his arms around both of them, and they stayed that way for a long time, a new family beginning to form from the pieces of broken lives. The next day, Daniel told Mrs. Foster that he wanted to stay with the Graysons. The paperwork was completed, and Daniel officially became their son. It was not a legal adoption in the formal sense, as such processes were still relatively informal in the territories, but it was binding enough. Daniel was theirs, and they were his. The first few weeks were an adjustment for everyone. Daniel had nightmares, waking up in the dark and calling for his dead parents. Sarah would go to him, sitting on the edge of his bed and rubbing his back until he fell asleep again. He was also wary of affection, flinching slightly whenever Franklin or Sarah reached out to touch him, though he was slowly learning that their touches meant comfort, not harm. But there were good moments too. Daniel loved helping Franklin with the cattle and learning to ride one of their gentler horses. He followed Franklin everywhere, absorbing information about ranching and animal care with the intense focus of a child starved for adult attention and guidance. With Sarah, he was quieter but no less attached. He would sit at the kitchen table while she worked, doing his lessons from the books she had ordered from Salt Lake City, asking endless questions about everything from cooking to sewing to the plants in her garden. By spring, Daniel had settled in completely. He laughed more often, smiled more easily, and had started calling Franklin and Sarah Pa and Ma without being prompted. Sarah thought her heart might burst with happiness every time she heard him say it. One evening in May, as they sat together after dinner, Daniel asked, "Ma, do you think we could get a dog? Some of the other ranches have dogs to help with the cattle." Sarah looked at Franklin, who was trying not to smile. "A dog is a big responsibility," Franklin said seriously, though his eyes were twinkling. "You would have to help train it and feed it every day." "I would," Daniel promised. "I would take really good care of it." "Then I suppose we should look into getting a dog," Franklin said, and Daniel's face lit up with joy. They acquired a puppy a few weeks later, a border collie mix that Daniel named Scout. True to his word, Daniel took excellent care of the dog, and Scout quickly became his constant companion. Watching Daniel play with Scout in the yard, laughing and running with the carefree joy of a child who finally felt safe, Sarah felt tears of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you," she said to Franklin one evening as they watched Daniel and Scout together. "For what?" Franklin asked. "For seeing something worth loving in me," Sarah said. "For giving me this life, for making me a mother, for everything." Franklin pulled her close and kissed her temple. "Thank you for having the courage to say yes," he replied. "Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for loving Daniel the way you do. Thank you for being exactly who you are." As the months passed, their little family thrived. The ranch did well, with their small cattle herd growing and Sarah's laundry and sewing business bringing in additional income. Daniel grew taller and stronger, his serious face now often creased with smiles. They heard occasionally about the Zimmerman family, but Robert seemed to have finally accepted that his vendetta was pointless. The sheriff kept an eye on things, and there were no more threats or attempts at violence. In the fall of 1880, Sarah received another letter from Mrs. Foster. She mentioned that there were still children in need of homes and asked if the Graysons might consider taking in another child. Sarah showed the letter to Franklin and Daniel at dinner that night. "What do you think?" she asked them. "Would you both be willing to expand our family?" Daniel looked surprised that his opinion was being asked. "You mean like a brother or sister for me?" "Exactly like that," Franklin said. "But only if you are comfortable with it. This is your home too, Daniel. Your feelings matter." Daniel thought about it seriously. "I think it would be nice not to be alone," he said finally. "At the orphanage, I did not have any friends really, but maybe a brother or sister would be different." They wrote back to Mrs. Foster expressing interest, and in December, they received word about a 5-year-old girl named Lucy, whose mother had died in childbirth, and whose father had been killed shortly after in a ranch accident. She had been living with a neighbor who could no longer care for her. When they met Lucy, Sarah fell in love immediately. The little girl had auburn hair and green eyes and a shy smile that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. Lucy was quieter than Daniel had been, more withdrawn, but Sarah saw the same need for love and security in her eyes. They brought Lucy home just before Christmas, and Daniel immediately took on the role of protective older brother. He showed her around the ranch, introduced her to Scout, and helped her settle into the small room they had added onto the house specifically for her. Sarah had sewn curtains and a quilt for Lucy's room, decorating it with dried flowers and making it as welcoming as possible. Christmas that year was magical. It was Lucy's first Christmas with a real family and Daniel's second with the Graysons, and they made it special with decorations. A small tree that Franklin and Daniel cut from the foothills, and simple gifts that had been chosen with love. Sarah made new clothes for both children, and Franklin carved wooden toys. They attended Christmas services at Father O'Reilly's mission, where the priest smiled warmly at their growing family. On Christmas night, after the children were asleep, Franklin and Sarah sat by the fireplace, watching the flames dance and flicker. "2 years ago I was alone and afraid," Sarah said softly. "I thought my life was over. And now look at us. We have a home, a ranch, 2 beautiful children. We have everything I never dared to dream of." "No one will marry a woman like me," Franklin said, echoing the words Sarah had spoken so long ago. "Do you remember saying that?" "How could I forget?" Sarah asked. "It was the truth, or so I thought." "And I said I would be the first," Franklin continued. "But Sarah, I was not being noble or charitable. I was being selfish. I saw a woman of incredible strength and courage, a woman who had been knocked down but refused to stay down. I saw someone I wanted to spend my life with, someone who would make me better just by being near her. I was not doing you a favor by marrying you. You were doing me a favor by saying yes." Sarah leaned against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart. "We saved each other," she said. "That is the truth of it. We were both lost in different ways, and we found each other and built something beautiful together." "To second chances," Franklin said, raising his coffee cup in a mock toast. "To second chances," Sarah echoed, clinking her cup against his. "And to new beginnings." The years that followed brought their share of challenges. There were harsh winters when they struggled to keep the cattle alive, dry summers when the creek ran low, and they worried about water for their crops. There were moments of doubt and fear, arguments about money or decisions that had to be made. But through it all, Franklin and Sarah faced everything together, their love deepening with each shared struggle and triumph. Daniel grew into a strong, capable young man who loved ranching as much as Franklin did. He had his father's steady nature and his mother's compassionate heart, and he was a natural with animals and with people. Lucy blossomed from a shy, withdrawn little girl into a bright, talkative child with a gift for drawing and a love of books. Sarah taught her to read and write, to sew and cook and garden, passing on the skills that had helped Sarah survive her own difficult years. In 1883, they took in another child, a 12-year-old boy named Thomas who had been abandoned by his family when they moved east and could not afford to take him. Thomas was angry and defensive at first, certain that the Graysons would eventually give up on him too. But Franklin's patient guidance and Sarah's unwavering love slowly broke through his defenses. He became an integral part of their family, helping with the heavier ranch work and eventually learning to read and write under Sarah's tutelage. By 1885, their little homestead had grown into a thriving ranch. They had expanded their land holdings, built a larger barn, and increased their cattle herd significantly. Franklin had a reputation as an honest, hard-working rancher, and Sarah's sewing business had evolved into a small store in Monticello, where she sold handmade clothes, quilts, and other goods. Their children were healthy and happy, their home was filled with laughter and love, and they had become respected members of the community. One spring evening in 1886, Sarah and Franklin sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the red rocks in shades of orange and pink. Daniel was in the barn finishing the evening chores, Lucy was inside helping Thomas with his reading lessons, and Scout was dozing at their feet. It was a peaceful moment, the kind they had learned to treasure. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Sarah asked. "If you had not been in town that day when I was shot, if you had not decided to help me all the time," Franklin admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it. What matters is what did happen. We found each other, Sarah. Against all odds, in the middle of difficulty and pain, we found each other and built this beautiful life." Sarah took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his in a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. The gold ring he had given her 8 years ago was worn smooth now, a testament to years of hard work and love. "I never thanked you properly," she said. "For what?" Franklin asked, puzzled. "For being the first," Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. "For seeing me when I was invisible. For loving me when I thought I was unlovable. For giving me a family and a home and a purpose. For making me believe in happy endings." Franklin pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "Sarah, you gave me all of those things too. Before I met you, I was drifting, working hard but with no real purpose beyond survival. You gave me something to build towards, someone to come home to. You made me want to be better, to do better. We built this life together, every step of the way." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Inside the house, they could hear Lucy laughing at something Thomas said, Daniel's voice joining in. These were the sounds of a happy home, of a family bound not by blood but by choice and love. "Ma, Pa," Daniel called from the doorway, "supper is ready. Lucy made biscuits and she only burned half of them." "I did not," Lucy protested indignantly. "They are just extra crispy on the bottom." Sarah and Franklin smiled at each other and stood, heading inside to their family. As they gathered around the table, holding hands while Franklin said grace, Sarah felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She thought about the woman she had been 8 years ago, bleeding and afraid behind a water trough, certain that her life was over. She thought about the cowboy who had stopped to help her, who had seen past her pain to the person underneath. "No one will marry a woman like me," she had said. "Then I will be the first," he had replied. And he had been. He had been the first to love her completely, flaws and all. The first to see her not as damaged goods but as someone worthy of respect and devotion. The first to give her the family she had always dreamed of but never believed she could have. After dinner, as Sarah tucked Lucy into bed, the little girl looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Ma, I am glad you and Pa adopted me. I love living here." Sarah kissed her forehead. "We love having you here, sweetheart. You are our daughter in every way that matters. Never forget that." "I know," Lucy murmured, already drifting off to sleep. "I know I am loved." Sarah stood in the doorway for a moment, watching her daughter sleep, then moved on to check on Thomas. The older boy was still reading by lamplight, determined to finish the chapter he had started. "Do not stay up too late," Sarah said gently. "You have chores early tomorrow." "I will not, Ma," Thomas promised, looking up with a smile. "Thank you for teaching me to read. I never knew books could be so interesting." "You are very welcome," Sarah said. "I am proud of how hard you have been working." She found Daniel in his room, oiling his boots in preparation for the next day's work. At 15, he was nearly a man, tall and strong with Franklin's steady demeanor and Sarah's compassionate heart. "You did a good job with the cattle today," Sarah told him. "Your father was impressed with how you handled that stubborn heifer." Daniel grinned. "Pa taught me well." "Ma, can I ask you something?" "Of course," Sarah said, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Were you scared when you adopted me?" Daniel asked. "I mean, you did not know if I would be a good son or if we would get along. Was not that frightening?" Sarah considered her answer carefully. "I was terrified," she admitted. "Not of you, but of failing you, of not being the mother you deserved. But your pa reminded me that love is not something you wait to feel completely before you commit to it. Love is a choice you make every day, and it grows stronger with each choice. The love I feel for you now is so much deeper than what I felt that first day we met. Not because I did not love you then, but because we have built that love together through years of choosing each other." Daniel nodded thoughtfully. "I am glad you chose me." "I am glad Pa chose you too, even when everyone said he should not." "So am I," Sarah said, hugging her son. "So am I." She found Franklin in their bedroom, already in bed but awake, waiting for her. Sarah changed into her nightgown and slipped under the covers beside him, settling into the familiar comfort of his embrace. "Our children are extraordinary," Franklin said, his voice rumbling in his chest beneath Sarah's ear. "They are," Sarah agreed. "We are very blessed." "Do you ever regret it?" Franklin asked quietly. "Not being able to have biological children. I know you said it did not matter, but after all these years of raising Daniel and Lucy and Thomas, does it ever make you sad?" Sarah was quiet for a moment, considering the question honestly. "Sometimes," she admitted. "Not often, but sometimes I wonder what a child with your eyes and my stubbornness would have been like. But Franklin, when I look at our children, I do not feel like they are any less mine because I did not give birth to them. Daniel has your patience and my determination. Lucy has your kindness and my love of learning. Thomas has your work ethic and my second chance at happiness. They are ours in every way that matters. And if I had been able to have biological children, we might not have adopted. We might not have given these three beautiful souls a home and a family. I would not trade them for anything." Franklin kissed the top of her head. "I love you, Sarah Grayson. I have loved you since the moment I saw you refusing to stay down, refusing to give up despite everything life had thrown at you. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "I love you too," Sarah whispered. "Thank you for being the first. Thank you for choosing me." "Always," Franklin said. "I will always choose you." As Sarah drifted off to sleep, safe and warm in her husband's arms, in the house they had built together, surrounded by the children they had chosen and who had chosen them, she thought about the strange and wonderful path that had led her here. A path that had started with pain and rejection, but had led to love and family and home. She thought about the young woman she had been, alone and afraid, certain that no one would want her. She thought about the cowboy who had seen past her scars to the woman underneath. She thought about the family they had built from broken pieces, creating something whole and beautiful and strong. "No one will marry a woman like me," she had said 8 years ago, certain she was speaking the truth. "Then I will be the first," he had replied, and in doing so had changed both their lives forever. As Sarah's breathing deepened into sleep, Franklin held her close, his own thoughts wandering through their shared history. He thought about the man he had been before Sarah, drifting from job to job with no real purpose beyond survival. He thought about the moment he had seen her diving behind that water trough, the moment that had set his entire life on a new course. He had told Sarah he would be the first to marry her, but what he had not told her until much later was that he had been just as lost as she was, just as in need of saving. Sarah thought Franklin had rescued her, but the truth was they had rescued each other. She had given him purpose, family, a reason to build something lasting. She had turned a lonely cowboy into a husband, a father, a man with roots sunk deep into the red earth of Utah territory. The next morning dawned clear and bright, promising a beautiful spring day. Franklin was up before sunrise, as always, starting the coffee and beginning the morning chores. By the time Sarah came into the kitchen, he had already gathered eggs from the henhouse and started a fire in the stove. They worked together in comfortable silence, preparing breakfast for their family. Daniel came down first, already dressed for work, followed by Thomas, yawning and still half asleep. Lucy was the last to appear, her hair tangled and her eyes bleary. "Good morning, sunshine," Franklin said, ruffling her hair affectionately. Lucy made a face but smiled. "Morning, Pa. Are we still going into town today? You promised I could look at the new books at the store." "We are," Franklin confirmed, "but not until after chores are done." After breakfast, the family scattered to their various tasks. Franklin and Daniel headed out to check on the cattle. Thomas went to mend a section of fence that had been damaged in the last windstorm, and Lucy helped Sarah in the garden. They worked until mid-morning, then cleaned up and loaded into the wagon for the trip to Monticello. As they rode into town, Sarah noticed how much it had grown in the 8 years since she and Franklin had married. There were new buildings, new businesses, new families, but there were familiar faces too. They passed Mrs. Patterson on the street, and she waved enthusiastically. They saw Sheriff Dawson talking to a shopkeeper, and he tipped his hat to them respectfully. Father O'Reilly was standing outside his mission, and he called out a friendly greeting. "Ma, can I go to the bookstore?" Lucy asked as soon as they arrived. "Stay where I can see you," Sarah instructed. "And do not go anywhere else without telling me first." Lucy scampered off toward the bookstore, and Daniel and Thomas headed to the feed store to pick up supplies. Franklin and Sarah walked down Main Street together, Sarah's arm linked through his, enjoying the beautiful day and the simple pleasure of being together. They were passing the general store when they heard a familiar voice call out, "Mrs. Grayson, Mr. Grayson, might I have a word?" They turned to see Reverend Hollis approaching, the same minister who had refused to marry them 8 years ago. Sarah felt Franklin tense beside her, and she squeezed his arm reassuringly. "Reverend," Franklin said coolly, "how can we help you?" Reverend Hollis looked uncomfortable, his thin face creased with an expression that might have been regret. "I wanted to apologize to you both. I have been carrying the weight of my actions for many years now, and I think it is past time I made amends." Sarah was so surprised she could not speak for a moment. Franklin found his voice first. "Apologize for what exactly, Reverend?" "For refusing to marry you," Reverend Hollis said. "For judging Mrs. Grayson without knowing her, for letting gossip and prejudice guide my decisions. I have watched your family over these past years. I have seen how you have taken in children who needed homes, how you have built a good life together through hard work and dedication. I was wrong about you, Mrs. Grayson, and I am sorry." Sarah felt tears prickling her eyes, but these were not tears of sadness. "Thank you, Reverend. That means more than you know. I understand if you cannot forgive me," Reverend Hollis continued. "I just wanted you to know that I recognize my mistake. You have proven to be one of the finest families in this community, and I should have seen that from the beginning." "We forgive you," Franklin said, extending his hand. "We all make mistakes, Reverend. What matters is that we learn from them." Reverend Hollis shook Franklin's hand gratefully, then tipped his hat to Sarah before walking away. Sarah leaned against Franklin, feeling a weight she had not even realized she was carrying lift from her shoulders. "That was unexpected," she said. "But good," Franklin replied. "Closure and all that. Though I still think Father O'Reilly is the better man," Sarah laughed. "No argument there." They continued their errands, picking up supplies and catching up with neighbors. Sarah stopped at her store to check on inventory and was pleased to see that several of her quilts had sold. Mrs. Chen was there, helping a customer, and she greeted Sarah warmly. "Business is good," Mrs. Chen reported. "That blue quilt you made, the one with the star pattern, 3 different people asked about it. I think you should make more." "I will," Sarah promised. "How are you, Mrs. Chen? Is your arthritis any better?" "Some better, some worse," Mrs. Chen said philosophically. "I am old, what can I do? But I am happy. My grandson writes me letters from San Francisco. He is doing well there. And I see you with your beautiful family, and I am happy for you too. You deserve this happiness, Sarah. You always did." Sarah hugged the older woman carefully, mindful of her frail bones. "Thank you for believing in me when no one else did. Thank you for giving me work and dignity when I had neither." "You earned it yourself," Mrs. Chen said firmly. "I just gave you the opportunity. You did the rest." As the afternoon wore on, the Grayson family gradually reconvened at the wagon. Lucy had bought 2 new books with money she had earned helping Sarah with sewing projects. Daniel and Thomas had successfully purchased feed and other supplies. Franklin had negotiated a good price for some lumber they needed to expand the barn. It had been a productive day. On the ride home, Lucy read aloud from one of her new books while Daniel and Thomas discussed plans for the fence repair. Franklin and Sarah sat together on the wagon bench, Sarah's head resting on Franklin's shoulder, watching the familiar landscape roll by. The red rocks glowed in the late afternoon sun, and Sarah thought once again how beautiful this harsh land was, how it had become home in a way she never expected. That evening, after chores were done and dinner was eaten and the children were in bed, Franklin and Sarah took a walk around their property. It was something they tried to do often, a chance to talk and reconnect away from the demands of children and work. They walked hand in hand through the pasture where their cattle grazed peacefully. They walked past the garden that Sarah tended so carefully, now showing the first green shoots of spring planting. They walked past the barn where Scout was curled up in his favorite spot. They walked to the edge of their property, where they could look out over the valley and see the lights of other homesteads twinkling in the growing darkness. "Happy?" Franklin asked simply. "Incredibly," Sarah replied. "Are you?" "More than I ever dreamed possible," Franklin said. "You know, when I was younger, I thought happiness was going to be some grand adventure, some exciting story. I never realized it would be this. A quiet life with a woman I love and children I am proud of. A home we built with our own hands. Work that matters. But it is, Sarah. This is the adventure. This is the story I want to tell. No one will marry a woman like me," Sarah said softly, the words that had started everything. "I was so certain, so absolutely convinced that my life was over. And I said I would be the first," Franklin continued. "But the truth is, Sarah, I was just as lost as you were. I was just better at hiding it. We saved each other. We built this life together. And every day I wake up grateful that I was in town that particular day, that I saw you, that I had the courage to help." "Not just courage," Sarah said. "Love. Even then, I think. Love at first sight might be a fairy tale, but love at first crisis, that feels more real. You saw me at my worst and chose to stay. That is the truest kind of love." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other's arms, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast sky above them. The same stars that had watched over them on their wedding night, on the night they brought Daniel home, on the night Lucy arrived, on the night Thomas agreed to stay. The same stars that would watch over them for all the nights to come. "What do you think our children will remember about us?" Sarah asked. "When they are grown and have families of their own, what will they say about us?" Franklin thought about it. "I hope they remember that we loved them completely, without conditions or reservations. I hope they remember that family is not always about blood, but about choice and commitment. I hope they remember that second chances are real, that broken people can build beautiful lives. I hope they remember to be brave, to be kind, to stand up for what is right even when it is difficult. I hope they remember that they were wanted," Sarah added. "That we chose them deliberately, that we fought for them, that they made our family complete. I hope they never doubt for a moment how much they were loved." "They will not," Franklin assured her. "How could they? We show them every single day." As they walked back to the house, Sarah thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. The pain and rejection she had endured, the loneliness and fear, the kindness of a stranger who became her husband, the children they had chosen and who had chosen them, the community that had eventually accepted and embraced them, the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. She thought about all the women out there who might feel as she once had, convinced they were unlovable, unworthy, destined for loneliness. She thought about all the men like Franklin, good and kind but searching for purpose and connection. She thought about all the children like Daniel and Lucy and Thomas, desperately needing families to love them. And she thought about the power of one decision, one moment of courage, one person saying, "I will be the first," instead of walking away. Inside the house, Sarah checked on the children one last time. Daniel was sleeping peacefully, Scout curled up at the foot of his bed. Thomas was also asleep, his book carefully marked and set aside for tomorrow. Lucy was stirring slightly, and Sarah tucked the quilt more securely around her small body. In their own bedroom, Sarah and Franklin prepared for sleep, moving through their nightly routine with the easy familiarity of years of practice. As they lay in bed, Franklin pulled Sarah close, and she fit against him perfectly, as if they had been designed specifically for each other. "You remember what you said to Daniel that first night?" Franklin asked. "About how everyone said no one would marry you and I said I would be the first." "Of course," Sarah said. "Why?" "Because I was thinking," Franklin said slowly, "that it is not just about marriage. I was the first to see your worth when others could not. But you were also the first for me in many ways. You were the first person to make me want to build something permanent. You were the first to make me believe I could be a good father. You were the first to make this wild, harsh land feel like home. We were firsts for each other, Sarah. We still are." Sarah turned in his arms so she could look at his face, barely visible in the moonlight filtering through the window. "Every day is a first with you," she said. "The first day of the rest of our lives together, and I cannot wait to see what tomorrow brings." They kissed, a long, tender kiss that spoke of years of love and decades more to come. And as they drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the quiet sounds of their sleeping children and the peaceful night, they both knew with absolute certainty that they had found what so many people spend their entire lives searching for. They had found home. They had found family. They had found love that was not perfect or easy, but was real and lasting and true. And it had all started with a simple promise from a cowboy to a woman who thought no one would want her. "Then I will be the first." Years continued to pass at the Grayson Ranch, each season bringing its own joys and challenges. Daniel grew into a fine young man, eventually marrying a teacher from Monticello named Catherine when he was 22. They built a house on a portion of the Grayson land that Franklin and Sarah gifted them, staying close to the family while starting their own life together. Within 2 years, they had a son they named Franklin Daniel, and Sarah cried tears of joy when she held her grandson for the first time. Lucy developed into a talented artist and writer, eventually opening a small bookstore in Monticello that also sold her drawings and paintings. She fell in love with a doctor named Henry, who came to Utah Territory from Boston, and they married when Lucy was 20. Their wedding was held at the ranch, with Father O'Reilly presiding and the entire community celebrating. Lucy and Henry had 3 children together, 2 girls and a boy, and the Grayson Ranch became the gathering place for the growing extended family. Thomas, who had arrived angry and defensive, became a lawman like Sheriff Dawson, dedicating his life to protecting others the way the Graysons had protected him. He married a woman named Ruth, whose family owned a neighboring ranch, and they had twin daughters who kept everyone entertained with their endless energy and mischief. Franklin and Sarah grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces weathering with years of work and sun, but their love never diminishing. They watched with pride as their children built good lives, as their grandchildren grew and thrived. They continued working the ranch, though as the years passed they gradually turned more of the physical labor over to Daniel and the ranch hands they had hired as the operation expanded. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Franklin surprised Sarah with a trip to Salt Lake City. They stayed in a hotel, a luxury they had rarely afforded themselves, and Franklin took her to a jewelry store where he bought her a new ring to go with her original wedding band. 20 years, Franklin said as he slipped it onto her finger. 20 years of waking up next to you. 20 years of building this life together. I would not change a single moment of it. Not even the hard parts, Sarah asked, thinking of the droughts and the harsh winters, the financial struggles and the occasional disagreements. Especially not the hard parts, Franklin said. Those are what made us strong. Those are what taught us that we could face anything as long as we faced it together. They were in their mid-50s when Father O'Reilly passed away peacefully in his sleep. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people whose lives he had touched, including Franklin and Sarah, and their entire family. A new priest came to take his place, but Franklin and Sarah always remembered Father O'Reilly as the man who had seen past convention and prejudice to bless their marriage when no one else would. Sheriff Dawson retired around the same time, and Thomas took over as sheriff of Monticello. One of his first acts was to officially close the file on Sarah's shooting, noting that while the perpetrator was never officially charged, the case was considered resolved. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything to Sarah, a final closing of that chapter of her life. Mrs. Chen passed away at the age of 82, surrounded by her family who had come from San Francisco for her final days. Sarah was with her at the end, holding her hand and thanking her one last time for the kindness she had shown a desperate woman so many years ago. "You made good life, Mrs. Chen whispered, her voice weak but her eyes clear. "I always knew you would. You had strength inside, just needed someone to see it." "You saw it," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "You and Franklin, you both saw it when I could not." Mrs. Chen smiled. "Now you make sure your grandchildren know. Make sure they know that strength comes from surviving, that family is what you make it, that love is always worth fighting for." "I will," Sarah promised. "I will make sure they know." On a beautiful spring day in 1898, 20 years after their wedding, Franklin and Sarah sat on their porch watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Franklin Jr. was 12 now, a serious boy like his grandfather who loved working with the cattle. Lucy's daughters, ages 8 and 6, were playing with their younger brother while Thomas's twins, age 10, organized some elaborate game that seemed to involve a great deal of running and shrieking. "We did it," Sarah said suddenly. "We built this. A family, a legacy. Children and grandchildren who are loved and secure. We took our broken pieces and made something whole and beautiful." Franklin took her hand, his thumb tracing over her rings, the gold worn smooth by 20 years of wear. "You did it," he corrected gently. "You had the courage to say yes when you had every reason to say no. You had the strength to trust again after being hurt. You had the wisdom to see that family is not about biology but about love and choice." "We did it together," Sarah insisted. "Always together." That evening, after the grandchildren had been collected by their parents and the house was quiet again, Franklin and Sarah took their customary walk around the property. They were older now, their steps a bit slower, but the ritual remained the same. They walked past the garden, more extensive now with fruit trees Franklin had planted years ago finally bearing abundant harvests. They walked past the expanded barn and the new pastures they had added as their herd grew. They walked to their favorite spot, the highest point on their property where they could see for miles in every direction. "Tell me again," Sarah said, settling into Franklin's arms. "Tell me how it started." Franklin smiled. It was a story they had told many times to their children and grandchildren, but they never tired of repeating it to each other. "I was in town picking up supplies," he began, "and I heard a gunshot. I saw you diving behind a water trough, bleeding and afraid but still fighting. And I knew in that moment that you were someone special, someone worth knowing. And I was terrified," Sarah continued. "Certain my life was over, that I would have to leave town, that I would be alone forever. But then this cowboy came along, with the bluest eyes and the kindest voice, and he offered to help me." "And you said no at first," Franklin reminded her. "So stubborn, even then." "I was protecting myself," Sarah said. "I had learned not to trust, not to hope. But you wore down my defenses with your persistent kindness and your refusal to give up on me. And then I asked you to marry me," Franklin said. "And you said, 'No one will marry a woman like me.' You remember what I said." "Then I will be the first," Sarah whispered, the words as precious now as they had been 20 years ago. "You said you would be the first, and you were. You married me when everyone said you should not. You loved me when I thought I was unlovable. You gave me a family when I thought I would never have one. You were my first, Franklin. My first real love, my first true partner, my first home. And you were mine," Franklin said softly. "My first love, my first real family, my first understanding of what home really means. Not a place, Sarah, but a person. You are my home. You always have been." They stood there as the sun set behind the red rocks, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple and pink. They stood there as the stars began to emerge one by one in the darkening sky. They stood there as the temperature dropped and the evening breeze picked up, carrying the scent of sage and juniper. And they stood there together, as they had for 20 years, as they would for all the years to come. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a love story for the ages. "No one will marry a woman like me," she had said all those years ago, broken and bleeding and certain her life was over. "Then I will be the first," he had replied, and in those 5 simple words had changed both their lives forever. They had been each other's first in so many ways. First love, first trust, first hope after heartbreak. They had been the first to choose each other when no one else would. They had been the first to believe in possibilities when circumstances said there were none. They had been the first to build a family not on tradition, but on love and choice and dedication. And now, 20 years later, surrounded by the evidence of their love in the form of children and grandchildren, a thriving ranch and a respected place in the community, they knew with absolute certainty that their gamble had paid off. Their leap of faith had landed them exactly where they were meant to be together, always together. The cowboy and the woman everyone said no one would marry, proving that sometimes the best love stories are not the ones that start perfectly, but the ones where two broken people choose to make each other whole. As they walked back to their house, their home, Franklin pulled Sarah close and kissed her under the emerging stars. "I love you," he whispered. "Today, tomorrow, and for all our tomorrows after that." "I love you too," Sarah replied. "Thank you for being the first. Thank you for being everything." And as they stepped into their warm, welcoming home, filled with memories of 20 years of love and laughter, struggles and triumphs, they knew that their story would continue to be written with each new day, each new grandchild, each new challenge faced and overcome together. They had started with nothing but hope and determination, and a promise made on a dusty street in Monticello, Utah Territory. They had built an empire of love that would last for generations. And it had all begun with one cowboy brave enough to look past society's judgments and see the true worth of a woman everyone else had dismissed. "Then I will be the first," he had said. And he was. And in being first, he had opened the door for all the beautiful moments that followed, all the love that grew, all the family that flourished. It was, Sarah thought as she climbed into bed beside her husband of 20 years, the most perfect love story she could have ever imagined. Not perfect in the fairy tale sense, but perfect for them. Real and hard-won and absolutely, completely worth every struggle. No one will marry a woman like me. Then I will be the first. 5 words that had changed everything, that had saved 2 lost souls, and created a legacy of love that would endure for generations. And as Sarah fell asleep in Franklin's arms, safe and loved and home, she whispered one final thank you to the universe for the day a kind cowboy had seen past her scars to the woman underneath, for the courage he had shown in being the first, for the love they had built together that had proven stronger than any obstacle. Their story had begun with pain and doubt, but it had become a testament to the power of love, the importance of second chances, and the truth that sometimes the family you choose is even more precious than the one you are born into. And it was a story that would live on in their children and grandchildren, a reminder that love, real love, was always worth fighting for. The end of one chapter, but the beginning of so many more. Together, always together.